I had barely unfinished packing in my Shanghai apartment. As a newly promoted senior manager, I imagined my adventure in a new country would be an exciting whirlwind. I couldn't have been more wrong. My first few days were filled with back-to-back client meetings, overflowing with bad news. They were ready to fire my firm. So I did what any overachieving eldest child would do. I worked my tail off. Day and night, rewriting strategies, restructuring teams, going to endless relationship-building lunches. My anticipated adventure had morphed into 12 to 15-hour workdays that extended late into the evening. Gradually, the accounts improved. My clients were happy and improved and increased their budgets. And I received accolades from my home office back in the States. But just as the clients were coming back on board and I was experiencing personal recognition, I became acutely aware of something. I was unraveling. The more success I experienced, the more anxious and insecure I became. Thoughts kept racing through my mind. What are you doing here? You weren't meant to succeed in this job. This is a huge mistake. I couldn't shut the voices off. I lost weight. I couldn't sleep. On the outside, I looked happy and successful. Inside, I was dying. I felt like a total fraud. How could I simultaneously appear so successful, yet feel so full of self-doubt? Late one night, my phone rang. It was my firm's CEO. He'd found my home number in China. My first thought, what is the CEO doing calling me? How does he know who I am? I panicked. My first thought, he's going to fire me. I was sure of it. But instead, he'd called to personally congratulate me for the great job I was doing with clients and wanted to know if there was anything he could do to help. You would think that call would have made my day, but instead, it sent me further into the abyss of self-doubt. It felt like everyone was looking at me, watching me, waiting for me to screw it all up so they could send me home in shame. Years later, when I became an executive coach, I learned what I was experiencing had an actual name. It's called the Imposter Syndrome. I had felt alone, but I wasn't. You see, the Imposter Syndrome is a global epidemic. And if we don't recognize it and remedy it, it can limit our potential and paralyze us. The Imposter Syndrome is a well-researched, well-documented phenomenon where successful people feel like they haven't earned their achievements. And you don't have to be a corporate executive to experience the Imposter Syndrome. You can be a parent, a teacher, an athlete, a student, a volunteer. No one is immune. When I was writing the book, Beating the Imposter Syndrome, my co-author and I interviewed 100 of our coaching clients, and we were stunned to learn that almost 90% had experienced the imposter syndrome at some point in their careers. And the thing about the imposter syndrome is, it's not just about feeling a little bit insecure. It's distinguished by an insidious, unrelenting feeling of unworthiness. People with the imposter syndrome say things like, I just work harder than everybody else. It was nothing. I didn't really deserve that promotion. Next time, they'll hire someone with real talent. Becky was a brand manager for an international consumer products company. She was in her early 30s, the mother of two, and had put herself through business school while working full-time. She was the youngest brand manager in her division and the only female. She was the epitome of a go-getter. Her work ethic was fierce. Her team loved her. Her managers loved her, even though she was an self-admitted perfectionist. Becky was chosen for many high-profile assignments and had recently been chosen to lead the launch of a new snack food. But Becky hid a dark secret. Inside, she was flailing. When we met for our first coaching session, she presented the demeanor of a calm, self-assured professional. Why are you here? I asked her. The floodgates opened. Tears streamed down her face. She said she wasn't spending enough time with her kids. She was working late almost every single night of the week. She was anxious and nervous all the time. And what really bothered her was that even though she had the same workload and same responsibilities as her male colleagues in her division, she had a lower title and salary. And worse, she didn't feel she had the right to ask for a promotion. Well, eventually, Becky dropped the bomb that was really the cause of her angst. You see, she had been up for a promotion in another division. This job would have given her better title, more salary, higher visibility. She'd even gone through the interview process. And midway through the process, she got cold feet and abruptly withdrew her name for consideration. Why did you do that? I asked her. And she said she didn't feel ready for the job and that she thought there were other people who were more qualified. Becky exhibited all the typical traits of someone with the imposter syndrome. She's type A personality. She was frequently given high-profile assignments. She was a self-admitted perfectionist. She was risk-averse, which showed up in her inability to advocate for herself. People experiencing the imposter syndrome are often the only one, maybe the only person of color, the only person of their age group. In this case, Becky was the only female in her all-male division, which heightened her sense of anxiety and isolation. Those of us who've experienced the imposter syndrome are terrified of failure, of making mistakes. And so we go into overdrive to try to make up for our supposed inadequacies, and it shows up as workaholism. And Becky also exhibited the classic denial of her own talents, and this unrecognized to value her own achievements ultimately cost her the career advancement she so desperately craved. But this doesn't have to be a terminal affliction. We don't have to live like Becky. And it starts with recognizing and owning our value. It means realizing that the goal isn't about attaining perfection or not making mistakes. It means being willing to let go of the anxiety that keeps us from taking the risks that we need to fulfill our full potential. It means letting go of those feelings of inadequacy, of feeling like an imposter. So how do we get there? 4 steps. First, focus on the facts. It's hard to convince self-critical overachievers that we've earned our success. So to counteract that belief, we look at the data. We look at our career progression, our past successes, because that is the first powerful step to combating the imposter syndrome. Second, we challenge our limiting beliefs. A limiting belief sounds like this: I'll never be promoted to vice president in my company because I'm a woman. I'll never be admitted to that university because no one in my family has ever gone to college. Limiting beliefs, we all have them. But what if we flipped it? What if those challenges that we encountered are the very things that allowed us to be successful? Think about it. Are you more tenacious? You better problem solver? More resourceful or resilient? The skills that we can learn from the challenges in our life, it's a really powerful way to release the hold that limiting beliefs have on so many of us. Third, we get clear on our strengths. Those of us who've experienced the imposter syndrome tend to overly focus on our weaknesses and downplay our strengths. So to counteract that, make a list of everything you do well. Better yet, ask your friends, family, colleagues what they think your assets are. And nothing is too small to claim credit. Are you great at building a team? Are you good at analyzing problems and patterns that others fail to see? Maybe you have the courage to speak truths when others hesitate. These are your gifts. The fourth and final step may be the hardest one of all. You see, we live in what I like to call the hyper-curated life. We live our lives online. We are on Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and LinkedIn and Facebook. And everywhere we want to put our best face forward. Online, we are witty, our children are geniuses, we take fabulous vacations, and we only eat artfully plated food. How can we possibly let people see our most vulnerable side? But here's a dirty little secret. We have all felt like we were faking it at some point. Quick poll. If you've ever felt like you're faking it, if you've ever felt like an imposter, raise your hand. See? Look around. We are not alone. And the more we can recognize the signs and symptoms of the imposter syndrome, the less it can have hold of us, and the more we can go on living our true potential. On December 8th, 2012, at 2 a.m., I received a phone call that changed my life forever. It was my mother calling to tell me that my younger brother, Bart, had been killed. He was 38 years old. And in the midst of my unbearable grief, a dear friend called me, and she was a practicing Buddhist, and she said this: even in the midst of unspeakable sorrow and tragedy, there is a gift. And at the time, I think I wanted to punch her. I didn't understand what she was trying to tell me. But 3.5 years later, I think I get it. You see, my brother Bart's death gave my life a fierce urgency and courage I had never experienced before. And it also taught me this: we are here for such a short time. What a shame to use that time feeling like an imposter. Our true gift is to live as our true selves right here today. Thank you.